Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 129L string trimmer. Customer complaint is that the starter don't work. Well, no, the starter's not going to work if you bring it to me in a bag. I think there was a problem with the starter and they tried to fix it. And when the spring came out, that was game over for them. It looks like the spring's intact though. And it looks like the starter housing's alright. I don't see anything immediately wrong with it. Let's see what we got in our bag of goodies here. I'm seeing 2 pieces of rope. So my guess is that they broke the rope, bought a new piece of rope, and then ran into problems. They got the rope cut to the right length, but we're going to get back to that rope. First, let's see if they brought us all the screws. I'm not sure how many we're supposed to have, but I'm going to separate them into coarse screws and fine thread screws. I know around that starter, the 3 screws that go into the crankcase are going to be fine thread, and the rest of them are going into plastic and they'll be coarse thread. And then there should be one for the center hub of the starter. So there's a assist spring on here, on this starter pulley. It looks like it's intact. Now if I wind up all the string that's the same length as the smaller diameter string that it came with, you can see that it's bigger than the diameter of the pulley. All of that string won't fit on there. There's a big difference in that. I don't know how well you can see it in the video, but there's some importance to using the same size string that you broke when you replace it, and not trying to just beef up the string, because you're going to end up with a really short piece of rope. So we're going to supply the correct string. Get rid of that other mess. First thing I want to do is get this assist spring out of the way. It's kind of hooked into the starter pulley. Get it over the hub and then pull it off of there. Now we're pulling the customer's rope out, and you know that bigger rope, when he put a knot in there, he really had to jam it into that pocket. It should have been the first clue that that rope wasn't going to work. Before we start with the rope though, we got to get this spring wound in here. Now there may be other methods of winding this spring. You know, in the past I've just bought a new spring and popped it in there. But this isn't really that bad a job. If you kind of hold at least one side at all times, you can just keep working the spring around the circle and feeding it in there, and it'll be fine. The main problem I'm having is that there's grease all over this pulley. This is a kind of a newer unit. It's got factory grease on it yet. So my hand was slipping a little bit. I'm not sure what that visit out the door was, but I do have an air hose out there. Maybe I was blowing some grease off of it. Not sure. But you can see how easily the spring just winds up on here. I would advise wearing glasses when you do this, because if it does pop out of there, you don't want to take out an eye. You get to a certain point and whatever's left on that spring is just going to drop into place. Just like that. Yeah, we had grease all over everything. So I do have a micro torch here, and I'm going to use that to burn the end of the rope. Get rid of the frays and keep it from fraying any further. I just melt it and then pull it through a rag, and then I end up with a nice sharp tip on the end of the rope that easily pushes through the hole in the pulley. And on this starter, once we have it through the hole in the pulley, we just put a single overhand knot in the rope and then pull it tight. Kind of set the knot. Now we can put this assist spring back in place. You'll see there's a little hook on the end, and it's obvious where it goes on a pulley, but then the spring has to be kind of snapped over the top of the center hub there. Just like that. And it'll stay in place there now. So you get a spring on each side of this pulley. Now winding the rope on there, you can see that we're not overfilling that pulley. And we have the same length rope as the fatter rope that the customer tried to put on there. Now this does have to be wound in a certain direction. And you can determine that by looking at the cover. But right now the pulley's sitting on the bench the way it's going to sit in the cover. And you can see where the hole is in the cover where the rope passes through. So we got the string on the same side as the hole. And speaking of that hole, take a close look at that metal grommet in there. If that thing's got a burr on it or a sharp edge, it could be the reason why the rope broke. So anytime you're doing a starter rope replacement, make sure you look at that grommet. Sometimes they wear so bad from years of use that the rope cuts right through the metal grommet and you create a sharp edge there that eventually cuts the rope. So the end of the spring has to catch a notch in the bottom of the cover. The spring and the notch, they're both obvious if you look at them. But getting them to line up isn't always easy. And here I'm kind of struggling with it. And you don't really know if it's lined up until the pulley drops down into place. Here I'm kind of eyeballing it to get it lined up with the piece down in the cover. And it's just a little bit of monkeying around. Once it drops in there though, you're going to want that rope in that notch in the pulley. Like I have it right now. Apparently it didn't drop down in there all the way, or I wasn't happy with it. So we're going to try it one more time. And I don't know how to better explain this, but the pulley is now below the level of that guard that goes around the outside of the rope. Before, the rope could have slipped over the top of that orange guard. Now we'll install the, let's see, this, maybe they call this the driver pulley. I'm not sure. This is the part that actually touches the starter pawls on the trimmer. Put our single screw in there. And we've got some spring tension on it. We're going to put a figure 8 knot in this rope just to make the knot a little bit heavier. We don't want that knot pulling through the handle. And it's loose because I may have to adjust the length of the rope yet. So now the rope is in the groove in the pulley, which means that it's going to be allowed to pass around that kind of guard or shroud that was around the pulley. So there's a little better shot of where the groove is. And now the rope is in the groove. You can see that. And now we're able to wind up the spring. That rope will pass around that guard. So now we got some better tension on here. But you don't want to just leave it. You need to check and make sure that when the rope is fully extended, you can still turn that pulley a little bit further. Meaning, it didn't stop because the spring was bound. It stopped because all the rope was out and there's still some play in the spring. So putting it back together, really no big deal. Just make sure you put the fine thread screws in the middle 3 holes that are going into the metal, and all the coarse thread screws are going to go into the plastic.
Stat line 3, please. Stat line 3.
I'm missing 1 screw. Luckily it's a common screw and I have plenty of them here. So we'll get this screw in here and then we'll fire this thing up, see if that starter works. And if it does, then that's all I'm going to have for you on the Husqvarna 129L string trimmer that needed a new starter rope. Thanks for watching. Later.